Well, I was going to release a video about the destruction of the gay pirate show today, but that is being held up by a sponsor thing. I won't bore you with the monotonous details of the YouTuber economy, so let's talk about something a little less controversial. Casting choices that involve Selena Gomez and the life and legacy of Amy Winehouse. I'll be real with you, some of my favorite films that I watched this year were biopics. For example, Oppenheimer is a film about scientist Robert J. Oppenheimer, his oversight of the Manhattan Project and the impending political scandals that followed the use of the atomic bomb during World War II. Or how about Iron Claw, a film that tells the story of the life of the Von Erich brothers, a wrestling family from Texas who experienced extreme tragedy in their endless quest to dominate the sport. At its core, the thing that made these biopics so successful in my opinion were of course a mix of talented directors and scriptwriters who were passionate about bringing these stories to life, but also the strength of the story structure. While the films I mentioned are based on the lives of real people, their stories in this context follow a traditional structure that we're used to seeing in movies. And of course there's room to build on that foundation and experiment with interesting ways to tell that story, which Oppenheimer definitely does. So I think when we're talking about biopics and biopic fatigue, a topic that typically does come up around Oscar season, it's important to keep sort of a nuanced mindset when we talk about what we like about the good ones and what we don't like about the bad ones. In my opinion, the bad ones are usually films about the lives of musicians, and we're going to talk about why. In the case of films about historical figures or entertainers like Oppenheimer and the Iron Claw, we're taken through a clear-cut series of events. And in most traditional biopics, it's usually the series of events that made those people notable or famous. The main issue with music biopics, in my opinion, is that a musician's career, whether they're dead or alive, is a lot more long and winding and gray than that, and it leaves so much room for personal interpretation about what to include and what to leave out that music biopics often end up sloppy and a little disjointed. I won't talk about Maestro too much here because that was the subject of my last video, but a big criticism I've seen of that film seems to be that the script is a little too focused on Bernstein's affairs and sexuality rather than his accomplishments in the world of music. It jumps around a lot through different periods in his life and takes a more personal and intimate look at him as a person rather than just a run-through of his accomplishments. That's a choice that the writers of Maestro made, and I'll give them credit for being ambitious, but what happens with musical biopics more frequently is that filmmakers try to do just a chronological rundown of the greatest hits, sprinkled in with some iconic copyrighted music, and usually ignoring any kind of controversy or complication with that person's life. And nothing is a greater offender of that than
same formula over and over.
Formulas are a complete and utter waste of time.
Formulas work. Let's stick with the formulas. I like formulas.
Okay, y'all wanted me to talk about it, so we're gonna talk about it. Bohemian Rhapsody is a 2018 biopic directed by this piece of shit about the iconic Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. This film is not good from a technical standpoint, its editing is choppy, its pacing is bizarre, and the more I sit with Rami Malek's performance as Freddie, the more I think it's cartoony and a little too one-note. But I remember when I first saw it in theaters, and I was like, this is pretty good. And I think the reason why I had a delayed reaction to the actual quality of the film was because it was, 2 hours of fictionalized band members of Queen making music, and then they would just play the hits, and who could dislike that? I like Queen's music, everyone does, so what could possibly be so offensive about it during the viewing experience? But it's not until after that you really get down to it, and that's pretty much the only thing that happens throughout the entire movie. I remember one scene where the band is getting into an argument about something, and all of a sudden one of the band members goes, "Hey guys, listen to this sweet bass line," and then we get a montage of Another One Bites the Dust. The whole film is just compiled of moments like that with no real build-up, and quite honestly a lot of ignorance when it comes to Freddie Mercury as a central character. I've read before that the production of this film was kind of a shit show because the living band members of Queen were a little too involved, and I think at one point mandated in their contract that they have an equal amount of screen time as Freddie Mercury, even though it's supposed to center on him. And so that's why we don't really get to know Freddie as a character, and why his life as a queer man seems to be so downplayed throughout. Because if you're going to make a film about Freddie Mercury, a queer man who died of AIDS, movies, you'd think that subject matter would be more explored throughout a movie about him. And this isn't to say that all music biopics have flopped or automatically will flop. Rocket Man, depicting the life of music legend Elton John, didn't get as much buzz because it got a little overshadowed by Bohemian Rhapsody at the time, but apparently it was pretty good. From reviews that I've read, it seems like the film is very unique and stylized, and it uses those choices to lend to telling the story of somebody as flamboyant and unique as Elton John. Additionally, one of my favorite movies ever is Selena, chronicling the life of Mexican pop star Selena Quintanilla, and we also got 2 Elvis movies. One of them I refused to watch because I'll be honest, guys, I don't really fuck with Baz Luhrmann at all, and the other one was Sofia Coppola's new film Priscilla, which takes a more intimate look at Elvis and Priscilla Presley's relationship. The genre can be done well if taken with enough care and nuance and, a clear vision of the singular story you want to tell about the musician's life or a particular point in their life. But it seems like for every good musician biopic out there, there's like 10 other stinkers waiting for their chance at the Oscars when many of them end up eligible for Razzies instead. I mean, the genre is so polarizing that it has its own separate genre of parody iconography, like Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which satirizes the common tropes of these types of films, and more recently the Weird Al Yankovic biopic starring Daniel Radcliffe, that in and of itself is a parody because of course it is. And while these movies have been relentlessly mocked and criticized, various new challengers approach each and every year. And today we got our first look at Back to Black, a biopic chronicling the life of the late great British singer Amy Winehouse, who died when she was just 27 years old.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
Here's the thing, I love Amy Winehouse. I love her music, and as a fan of Amy Winehouse, I understand that she was ridiculed by the media for her struggles with alcohol and drug addiction, and she was the butt of everyone's joke literally until she died. Don't believe me? Look up the cake Neil Patrick Harris had at his Halloween party in 2011. This is not me being sensitive. I promise it's so much worse than you think it is. Now back to this movie, directed by the guy who made 50 Shades of Grey. Yes, really. This isn't my first time hearing about this film. I remember a few behind the scenes photos that leaked from the time it was filming, showing the infamous breakdown and arrest, and most people weren't happy about it then, and I watched the trailer today and it still leaves little to be desired for me. And look, that's not to say art doesn't have its place in the world, no matter how unsavory or ugly it is. People have the right to make whatever movies they want, and I don't think that art about real people has to be overly flattering, because that's how we get a Bohemian Rhapsody situation. My issue with this film, I guess, is that after Amy Winehouse was criticized and made fun of for most of her career, most of her life really, only receiving dignity in death, we're now going to turn around and pretend like we're celebrating her legacy. Like a year from now, we're all gonna tune in for award season after this movie comes out, and everyone in that room who made jokes about her is going to pretend that they were fans of her the whole time. You know what I mean? I just can't think of a good reason for an Amy Winehouse biopic. Her life was that she made good music, had a bunch of personal and intimate struggles that were made public, and then she died tragically. And maybe I'll be proven wrong here, but in my mind, there's no film that really does that justice. Musical biopics are a balancing act because you want to depict a person's career properly without making them feel like a lifeless prop, but you also don't want to lean in too hard on their faults and exploit their trauma, and it's hard for filmmakers to get this balancing act correct. And I would argue most of them shouldn't attempt it. But unfortunately, biopics are the biggest topic of Hollywood-related internet discourse, and they are the quickest way for actors and filmmakers to catapult their way into awards graces, whether they have the best intentions or not. But it feels like discourse over biopic casting has become the new discourse over Disney live-action remake casting, and sometimes even I fall for it. I remember on Twitter a couple days ago, people were discussing whether or not Timothée Chalamet should be cast in a Bob Dylan biopic after this image of Dominic Sessa from The Holdovers went viral, where he's just exuding what appears to be more Bob Dylan-esque energy, I guess. When in reality, let's think about this for a second. What is this movie actually going to do for me? I'm going to see it when it comes out because I know it's going to inevitably be in awards contention. I'm going to watch it once, say either that was fine, or that was problematic, or maybe it was good. Never watch it again because none of these ever have any rewatch value. Then go home, go on the Bird app, and read some dumb discourse about how Bob Dylan should have been canceled or whatever. It's all starting to feel very inauthentic and assembly line manufactured, which is the one way it should not feel when we're talking about filmmakers having the responsibility of profiling the lives of famous and often very complex people. Even today, it was announced that Selena Gomez was cast in a biopic about Linda Ronstadt. And people online were like, oh my god, she's gonna eat, she's gonna be perfect for this role. First of all, who was clamoring for a Linda Ronstadt biopic? And second of all, do you even know who Linda Ronstadt is? You know why Selena Gomez stans are excited that she's going to be in a Linda Ronstadt biopic? Because it's going to mean that she's going to be as close as she ever has been and probably ever will get to an Oscar nomination. Because everyone knows that that's what that means. I just wish that when it comes to musical biopics in particular, there was more care put into these types of things overall. Because I've seen biopics that I really like, some of them that I've mentioned this year that I really enjoyed. And the reason why they were so good was because they were made by people who cared with an actual story to tell. But I don't know, maybe I'm on some hater shit, and if I am, I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments down below. While you're there, let me know what your favorite biopic is or what your least favorite biopic is. I'm very curious to know. Reminder to follow me here on Twitter, and you can also subscribe to my Patreon for just $2 a month for extra weekly bonus content. The Our Flag Means Death video should be out as soon as I get sponsor approval, so probably sometime this weekend. And next week, How the Internet Fell Out of Love returns, and we're going to have a brand new set with all of the special finishing touches on it. Thanks so much for all your continued support, and I'll see you next time.